So it's great to be here. Thanks all for coming to our presentation here to talk a little bit about LocalStack and developing serverless applications on your local machine. So maybe just a quick show of hands before we dive into the agenda. Can we just get a quick show of hands? Who has heard about LocalStack before? Maybe even used it? Okay, so there's about half of the people here in the room, so that's great. So we're going to keep it relatively high level and also want to talk a bit about the AWS partnerships that we've been doing recently, which is really exciting to share with you all. So this is the agenda we want to go through. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Let's dive right in. So generally speaking, what is LocalStack? We are imagine you have like local AWS sandboxes, right? Giving you the ability to develop and test your applications on the local machine without being connected to the cloud environment or before connecting to the cloud. So what you see here is kind of a traditional workflow. You start with some local environment, right? Do some local testing, maybe ID integration. Then you run some tests in the CI/CD environment, and then finally you push changes up to the real cloud once you're happy with the application you're developing. So some of the benefits here you see is that you get these instant feedback loops by running things locally, not having to push every change into the cloud. You have fully isolated test sandboxes that run in your CI/CD process, so no overriding of changes of each other. And again, you ship to production with confidence once you're happy with the changes you've made locally. So there's more than 100 AWS services that we have in our stack today. So I think it's 120 at this point, everything from Lambda, SQS, DynamoDB, IAM, you name it. And we also integrate with most of the existing infrastructure as code tools, Terraform, CDK, you name it. So we really try to meet the developers where they are, make sure that you can just run your applications locally. So how does it generally work, right? So it's basically a Docker image that you spin up as a container, right? So you just basically install the CLI, you say LocalStack start, it spins up, you can see the banner here in the terminal. And then the second thing is you just interact with it, which basically just means setting the AWS endpoint URL to localhost, and then you're off to the races. You can just use the AWS CLI and all your native tooling there. So one of the questions we often get is, okay, how do we actually keep up with the amazing pace of AWS and all the great innovation that's coming out there? We heard many announcements at reInvent already this year. So almost everybody visiting our booth has this question. So basically, it boils down to a couple of combination of factors. So first of all, we've built a lot of internal tooling. One of them is called ASF, the AWS Server Framework. So we do a lot of automated scraping of the API specifications. We always detect when there's a new change coming out with AWS services. The second part is we have an enormously talented engineering community in-house and also the open source community. So there's a lot of people just rambling behind building these emulators, which is a phenomenal effort, really. And then thirdly, what we're going to talk about today also is there's more and more partnerships going on, specifically with AWS. So we can do same-day launches and make sure that you actually get all these great new features in the local developer experience once they're released by AWS. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Shridhar, and he's going to share a little bit from AWS perspective the serverless dev challenges.
Thank you, Waldemar. As we have discussed, LocalStack capabilities and how it keeps pace with AWS services, I want to shift our focus to, there's some loud music playing back there, so if you hear any feedback, just know it's not me. We should shift our focus to serverless developer challenges. Serverless developers face when they're building serverless applications. Now, these challenges represent the pain points we are collaboratively addressing, right? The AWS serverless team has been at work and particularly focused on improving the developer experience, which is why this partnership is so valuable. Let's start with the challenges. We break it down into 4 key areas that affect serverless developers on a daily basis. The challenges significantly impact productivity, code quality, developer satisfaction, and just the quality of your overall application when it comes to even things like operational efficiency and so on, right? So we'll explore each of them in detail in the upcoming slides. The first is testing in the cloud. Cloud-based validation slows things down. It slows down your iteration cycles. AWS research shows that developers spend a considerable amount of time on their local devices where they're testing and writing code rather than in, so what that means is it is critical to get them going fast as soon as possible to their stage where they're able to see what their app they're building, what it looks like. Now each code change requires a full cycle if you're deploying to production, so you have to go through validation, testing, deployment, and the feedback loops could stretch anywhere from minutes to hours. This dramatically reduces the developer productivity and innovation velocity, which is obviously not a good thing. So what should be a quick test usually becomes a cycle, a lengthy process, and this forces developers to batch changes or make educated guesses rather than actually relying on real validations. The second challenge is context switching between tools. It comes with a significant cognitive overhead of constantly switching between different tools. Developers routinely shift between IDEs, CLIs, and resource emulators. What this does is it creates fragmented workflows. And each context switch disrupts what you're trying to build. It disrupts your flow, it reduces productivity. Managing multiple tools increases the likelihood of errors and creates significant mental overload as well. Now, this is particularly noticeable in serverless development where you're working with multiple services, for example, the likes of Lambda, SQS, EventBridge, API Gateway, you name it. There's always a myriad of services that you're working together with, and there this challenge is the most pronounced. The next is configuration complexity. Port mapping and code edits for local service integration tests. They introduce inconsistencies between local and cloud environments. Developers must maintain separate copies of configuration for local versus cloud computing or cloud testing. And this leads to the classic, works on my machine problem that you've all run into at some point. These manual configurations are not only error prone, they can be time consuming, and it requires a constant maintenance cycle as applications evolve and get bigger and bigger. And the last one is, and this one I want to stress is super important for serverless developers, is integrations. I touched upon multiple services earlier. Integration testing is difficult, period. Now, troubleshooting Lambda functions in the context of AWS service integrations with DynamoDB, S3, SQS, this requires complex setup. And event-driven architectures can be particularly challenging to test locally, and what ends up happening is developers resort to test in production approaches, and we all know that we shouldn't rely on that. So the hidden complexity of service integrations is much larger than the function code itself, and this creates a significant testing gap. So now that we understand the challenges, let's look at the solutions LocalStack and AWS developed together. The collaboration between AWS and LocalStack addresses all these challenges through a seamless integration that brings best of the both worlds. In the next slide, I'll talk about how this simplifies the experience of working on a local IDE. And scan the QR code if you want to read more about offline. So the AWS toolkit for VS Code now integrates directly with LocalStack. We launched this integration back in September. This creates a unified development experience. The integration enables local testing of Lambda functions with full AWS service integrations. It provides consistent behavior between cloud and local environments. And it eliminates the manual configuration of various service integrations and service connections. This results in accelerated development cycles. It reduces context switching, and it simplifies the integration testing cycle. And it also helps you ascertain the code quality, meaning that the code is of high quality before you actually send it to production, integration testing, or even staging environments. And let's get more specific first on what are the benefits. I know that I talked about addressing these challenges. So let's talk about them. So you get one-click LocalStack setup directly in your Visual Studio Code IDE. That means no more complex Docker commands or configuration file. It's all handled for you. The second thing is that you can access all your emulated resources directly from your VS Code IDE. This means that you get to stay in your development environment without having to switch context between multiple tools and interfaces. You can also easily switch between local and cloud resources with a simple click, making it seamless to test locally and then deploy to the cloud rather than deploy to the cloud and then test. So we're kind of reversing the paradigm here. And most importantly, you get a dramatically faster local feedback loop. Changes that would take minutes to test in the cloud can be validated in seconds locally, and this significantly accelerates your development velocity. With that said, let's take a quick look at the live demo that Waldemar is going to talk about.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shridhar. I just wanted to emphasize we couldn't be more excited to stand up here on the booth or at the stand as LocalStack together with the AWS Lambda team, PM. So it's a really exciting integration for us all here to talk about this. And we would have loved to show you like an actual live demo. This is a recorded video that I'm going to play here, and I'm going to speak to it. It's about a 3-minute video, and we'll see what's going on there. So basically, what we're showing here is the VS Code integration that Shridhar was talking about. And we're going to deploy a simple sample application, fully run it on LocalStack via the AWS toolkit, and then at the end also show how you can do breakpoint debugging directly from the IDE. So I'm just going to kick off this video here and speak to it a little bit. I know it's pretty fast, but let's just dive in and see what it does. So what we say here, we're creating a new project here that's called LocalStack Hello World. This is actually a SAM, a serverless application template. So it basically renders a CloudFormation template that you can directly deploy via SAM. And the nice thing is you could just take the whole thing and deploy it against AWS. Totally works out. But what we're going to do here is we're actually doing a SAM deploy and specify the profile LocalStack. The profile LocalStack is just a local AWS profile like any other. The only thing is that we actually define the endpoints to be localhost, right? That's literally the only difference that you see there. So we're doing the SAM deploy, specify a couple of parameters like region, stack name, and just the basic information. This is all standard AWS deployment, right? But again, the deployment is actually happening against LocalStack. So we see the stack resources here. It's pretty snappy, which is in a couple of seconds everything is deployed. And we see now we have an API gateway with a Lambda function deployed that's running fully locally. This is our application, a web app, app.localstack.cloud. If you want to give it a try, it's a bit like the AWS console where you can browse your resources locally. And this is the Lambda function we just created here. And now we're actually doing an invocation. So at the bottom of the screen, you can see a curl command. We're just doing a curl. We're just replacing Amazon AWS.com with localhost.localstack.cloud. Otherwise, it's exactly the same kind of endpoint, and we see the invocation was done. So we just a full round trip of an API gateway Lambda invocation that connects to DynamoDB. Now we're making some changes in the Lambda, which is change the messages coming back here, do another SAM deploy. So this is basically just redeploying the changes we just made in the IDE. And again, it's just going to take a couple of seconds. It's doing the CloudFormation updates, and we should be done in a second. And then we're going to run the curl command one more time, and it will show the updated output. So now this is what we've seen so far is pretty much table stakes. This is just LocalStack basics in a sense, but now the exciting part is going to come for all those of you familiar with LocalStack. So what we're going to show here now is the remote debugging capability in the AWS toolkit. So what the toolkit provides is effectively a remote debugging where you can set a breakpoint directly in the Lambda code. And on the right-hand side, you see the remote debugging configuration. You can use that against AWS as well, and also natively the same experience against LocalStack. So it's just literally the same experience that you get there. So we have the local endpoints, we do the remote invoke, and it actually hits the breakpoint right there. We can make changes, we can step over the code, just the regular debugging experience that you're all used to in your day-to-day work. So that is, and then we see the updated output in the end. So that was a quick walkthrough. I know that the video was pretty fast, but hopefully we were able to give you a bit of a glimpse into the experience that you have to, with the AWS toolkit together with LocalStack. And it's worth mentioning, as Shridhar said, no more need to configure any Docker Compose files or complex setup. It's all fully integrated. It's just a turnkey solution in that sense. So with that, I just want to sort of close out with just mentioning again the partnerships and the collaborations that we're doing together with AWS, which again is super exciting for us as we're kind of growing the open source community and also our business. So we have been launching in the past already I think it was probably half a year ago, also step functions testing integration with LocalStack. So there's actually a couple of features that were coming out in step functions recently. Test state API, JSON auto support, and variables. So for those of you using step functions once in a while or on a regular basis, those are some really killer features that AWS put out some time ago. And we basically were able to do same-day launches together with AWS, right? So we're partnering up very closely with the folks over there to make sure that all the good stuff that's coming out is available to you like in an instant, right? tested API, I think, is actually something very recent at reInvent, if I'm not mistaken.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So that's just another example, even besides the toolkit of the partnership that's now taking shape more and more. And there's more to come. There was actually literally at reInvent a launch around Lambda managed instances. If you haven't seen the announcement, then maybe you can check it out. We also put out a blog post there. And again, it was like a same-day launch that we were able to do as we were very closely partnering up with AWS. The second part that we're of course focusing on an ongoing basis is just improved parity. So we want to make sure that any stack you deploy really has the high fidelity that you would expect from a local emulator. And we're working very hard together with our team, with the community, to make sure that this is a high fidelity, a digital twin of your cloud environment, if you will. And then the third one is around, of course, developer experience is becoming a big topic, also AI. It plays into our day-to-day lives of how we're building cloud applications. So we're building sort of on top of the emulator developer experience features to give you more debugging capabilities, more insights into your stack, debug your IAM policies, for example, and much more. And AI is also coming as a new means of developing applications, and we have a secure local sandbox that you can use for your agentic coding there. So with that, I want to close out the session. We have a couple of minutes left, but definitely want to give a shout out. Please visit at our booth 1626. It's right over there, just literally behind the Redis booth. You'll find the LocalStack booth. We're going to show you some live demos, show you the AWS toolkit integration. The team's going to be there to answer any questions you might have. Again, we'd love to get your feedback and see what's coming out next at LocalStack. Also, please do give us feedback. That would be great. So in the app, you have a way to provide feedback for the session. If there is anything we can improve or learn from it, we always appreciate any feedback you can share with us. So with that, I'm going to close. And again, thank you so much for your attention and being here. And very much looking forward to everything that's coming next in local cloud development. Thank you all.